to the Harwich Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing this Wednesday, August 29th, 2018, here at the Griffin Meeting Room at Harwich Town Hall. We will hear the cases that I guess I'm going to read out. Our clerk is absent. And at the appropriate time, I will invite the public to offer any comments they might have. I think first, though, I need to tell you we are being videotaped. The videographer is over in the corner there. This will appear on the Channel 18 YouTube page. Usually it goes up the day after, but if not, 2 days after, it will be up there. I'd like the board members to introduce themselves, please.
Kathleen Muller.
Dean Hedderstead.
Dave Ryer.
Al Donahue.
Mike Capoli.
Megan Mayhew.
And Sheila Delaney, Secretary.
Okay, thank you. Case 2018-16 continued from our 7/25/18 meeting. Ernest G. and Linda M. Crabtree have applied for a special permit to construct a second-floor addition above a detached garage to use as an accessory building with an apartment within the setbacks. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-51H, Table 1, Use Regulations, and Table 2, Area Regulations. It's set forth in MGL Chapter 40A, Section 6. The property is located at 176 Great Western Road, map 37, parcel N1, in the RL zoning district.
And the applicants have written a request to withdraw without prejudice. If we can get a motion for that, and I'll have you sign that.
Okay, voting on the motion will be Ms. Muller, Mr. Hedderstadt, Mr. Donahue, Mr. Capoli, and Ms. Mayhew. I will take a motion in case 2018-16 to let them withdraw without prejudice.
I so move.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion granted.
So I'll have you just sign that. 2 places, and I'll bring that down.
Okay, thank you. Okay, case 2018-18 continued from our July 25th, 2018 meeting. Jane C. Bird, through her agent Russell Bassett, has applied for a special permit to finish the second floor level, adding habitable space onto a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325, Table 2, Area Regulations, as set forth in MGL Chapter 40A, Section 6. The property is located at 4 Carriage Lane, map 53, parcel G4 in the RR zoning district. Voting on the case will be Ms. Muller, Mr. Hedderstadt, Mr. Donahue, Mr. Capoli, and Ms. Mayhew. I will not vote. Yes, sir, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes,
and who's at
my
the
name is
table.
Peter Farber. I'm an attorney from Chatham, and with me is Russ Bassett, the prospective builder. Ms. Bird was here last month but couldn't be here tonight for family reasons. This proposal is an appeal of a decision of the building inspector or building commissioner, and the handout is just a copy of Section 325-54 of your zoning bylaw, and I would direct the board's attention down to paragraph A2 at the bottom of the first page, where it says, if the building official determines that a proposed addition or extension to a non-conforming single or two-family residential structure increases the non-conforming nature of the structure, the applicant may seek a new determination from the Board of Appeals. And so that's what we're here for this evening. I'm going to begin with identifying the non-conformities relative to this property. And the application contains a table where we provide what is the required and then the existing, and then also identify if there's any change. So this property was built in or about 1970, at a time when the zoning was quite different. Everything about this house, it's a single-family home on a 34,000 square foot lot. Everything was consistent and in compliance with the bylaw when it was built. It has become non-conforming because the minimum lot area changed to 40,000 square feet, and the frontage changed to 150, and the side yard setbacks changed to 20, where before I think they were either 15 or 10. So we can't change the area, and we can't change the frontage. Those, of course, remain the same. The house is compliant with the front yard setback, the side yard setback on one side. It is non-compliant with the 20-foot setback on I think it's the westerly side. So the house is non-conforming, but very little of the lot is occupied. I think it's 3.5% when 15% is allowed. The height of the building is conforming at 26 feet when 30 feet is allowed. And there's no changes to any of the exterior dimensions of the home. I show that in the last column on page 3 of the application. So the question is, why are we even here? Why, or I guess the better way to put it is, why did the building inspector find that what Mrs. Bird is planning to do would require a special permit and cannot be done as a matter of right? Directing your attention to the home, and we do have plans, and that was why the hearing was continued from last month, because we didn't have the plans. And these are a plan prepared by Donald Meyer, and what it shows is the second floor of the home, and over on your left, which is the west side, it says existing attic.
Mr. Farber, let me interrupt. We don't have the plans in our package, do we?
That was from last month, so.
Yeah, but the plans, that's what we
Oh,
made
no,
him
so
come
we've
back for.
given no plan.
No, that's not true. I submitted those, and I had them stamped downstairs. You took a bunch of copies from me. Yeah, it was you. For this.
Is it just this one?
That one, sure. I have more, I'll be glad to hand out,
I
but
can
I
go over
did
and make copies
go down to the
quickly.
clerk and have them stamped.
No, not this plan, we wanted a,
This is the larger copy, and I gave you 2
Yeah,
copies.
this is
Would this
what
be
we
sufficient
wanted.
if I go over and make copies quickly?
Sure.
I don't, you probably don't have to, I probably have enough.
No, you better get some more. It's only a few.
yeah, this is what we asked them to come back with this
sure.
month, with the
Yeah,
plan,
yeah,
just to show us what they proposed to do.
I also had the large
Thank
copy, just
you.
thought that would be a little easier for you to
Exactly,
handle.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's a large copy. I gave you 2, I think, of those. When I turned over.
Okay, well, I've got this one, that's fine.
You good with that?
I've- Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, sorry for the interruption, but I realized that the
That's
plans
okay.
are not right.
We'll wait till the secretary.
But your plan is on your mic.
So we'll wait.
Yeah, we're just gonna wait for our secretary for a minute.
Oh, it's right, sorry.
No, Mr. Chairman, that's the one that was stamped by the town clerk.
Okay,
Okay?
okay.
Anybody else need?
I'll take one of those, what I gave mine up.
No, I think,
Got a couple, yeah.
I think we've got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shayla.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And it looks like what happened was it got stamped down by the town clerk and didn't make it upstairs.
So we've got them now.
It did, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I brought it up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. If you could
So-
proceed, sir.
I did make a mistake. Mr. Bassett just brought to my attention. The frontage is conforming. It's 153 feet, 150 is required. In any event, directing your attention, there are some, to the application, there's photos of the existing home, and you can see it's very traditional, a very modest home. And the second photo is of the westerly side, and if you look upstairs, you'll see the two windows together, and that is the room that has been up till now an attic, and it's proposed to turn that into a bedroom. And there is another bedroom in the house that's going to be discontinued per the Board of Health, and the way that the board requires it, that the wall be opened up to a 5-foot clear opening. So there's no change in terms of what the Board of Health requires. The septic system continues to serve this home. So the question is the conversion of an attic space to finished space, sheetrock, insulated, wired, no plumbing, is that something that requires review by the Board of Appeals? And it's our position that it does not. And the reason essentially is twofold. The first, and attached to my application, is Section 3 of the Zoning Act. I think I attached that, yes. And this is the statewide zoning act, and I've highlighted the first sentence of the second paragraph. And I don't need to read the whole sentence. The first clause is what's important. It says, "No zoning ordinance or bylaw shall regulate or restrict the interior area of a single-family residential building." So although the building official will certainly review the work by Mr. Bassett, as I said, the Board of Health will review, but zoning does not deal with interior space in an existing dwelling. It's generally residential space now. There's no projections from the home in a lateral direction. There's no increase in the height of the building, no dormers are being added. It's purely interior space. Now, when we were here last month, the chairman brought to my attention the fact that the state building code defines habitable space to exclude attics. Actually, bathrooms are also excluded, halls, closets, things like that. So I would agree that for purposes of the building inspector's review, this is an increase in habitable space and would require him to review the plans and the work and make sure it's in conformity with the code. But from a zoning perspective, what we want to focus on is whether there's any additions to the existing structure, especially additions that would make the structure more non-conforming, additions upwards in the height of the structure, or additional habitable space outside the footprint of the and the walls and roof of the existing dwelling. And none of that applies here. This is purely interior space, start to finish. So I handed out, as I said at the beginning, Section 325-54. And in the beginning, Section A, it talks about when a building commissioner may grant a permit as of right. And it talks about proposed additions or extensions that would conform with current setbacks. They don't apply, that section doesn't apply because there are no additions or extensions. And B, that's A, 1 and 2. B talks about dormers, but they are allowed as a matter of right, so long as they don't increase the square footage, which I would say is the footprint of the structure. So that's the closest, and those are allowed as a matter of right. But we don't even get to that point because we're not even breaking through the roof. And then we move on down, and we turn to the second page, and kind of a carryover says that the sentence, "An addition or extension that increases the non-conforming nature of the structure would include a structure built in the same footprint but to an increased building height." This, to me, is a replacement structure. In other words, a demolition of an existing structure and then construction of a new structure, same footprint, increased height, and under the Harwich bylaw, that's defined as a increase in the non-conforming nature. I think the reason for that is once you demolish a structure, particularly in this case, this one, you could move it over the 5 feet and make it conforming. So by maintaining the nonconformity, the town meeting has decided that should be looked at by the Board of Appeals. Again, that doesn't apply because we're not demolishing the structure and we're not adding to it or extending it in any direction. And then the subsection B is, now we're again at the top of the second page, a structure built in the same footprint that does increase the habitable floor area. Now, again, a structure built in the same footprint, I think, is a new structure. So, for instance, if Miss Bird was tearing down her home and building a new structure in the same footprint, and this time around she was going to finish off the attic, I would say that would be an increase in habitable floor area, and she'd be required to obtain a special permit under the Harwich bylaw. But again, she's not demolishing the structure, she's leaving it exactly as it is and merely finishing off some interior space to make it into habitable space. But no extensions, no dormers, no additions of any sort. The rest of the sections of the bylaw talk about demolitions and replacements, and it goes on and on. And again, it doesn't apply to this section. So I think that the building inspector was thinking in terms of the attic is on the side of the home that is 5 feet too close to the sideline. And since it's being converted to habitable space, he felt that that should come before the Board of Appeals. And we're suggesting that if indeed it was a demolition and reconstruction, it would have to. But when it's purely within the existing structure and there's no additions or extensions, it comes under the state law that says no ordinance or bylaw shall regulate or restrict the purely interior area of a single-family residential building. So, in conclusion, my client is asking the board to overturn the building inspector's interpretation in this instance and conclude that this will not need review by the Board of Appeals, and certainly no finding. The board doesn't have to get to the finding of substantial detriment to the neighborhood, but I would suggest that if the board were to go that route, there of course would be no substantial detriment to the neighborhood. Nobody will even know in the neighborhood that this work is being done, and it will be the same people living in the home. The bedroom just moves from downstairs to upstairs. So with that, unless you have any questions, I'm finished with my remarks.
I would respectfully disagree with your interpretation because that sub B there, the prelude or the preface to that is an addition and extension that increases the non-conforming nature of the structure would include. And B is only one of the possibilities, and this board has always taken the position that even if it's not an entirely new structure, if you're doing exactly what your proposal is, changing the attic to something that's now going to be habitable, you need a special permit. So I'd like you just to give us a little more on why this is not going to be substantial detriment to the neighborhood.
Well, the sentence that you're alluding to begins an addition/extension. And there's no addition and there's no extension here.
Well, I would argue it's an addition. But in any event, okay.
And that's really it.
my position, and the board will decide, because I'm not gonna vote, I think you need a special permit. Now, personally, I agree, I think you meet the requirement for a special permit. I don't have any problem, but I do not see a basis to overturn the building commissioner's decision. But we'll see what the other board members think. Kath?
I actually agree with Mr. Farber.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not a lawyer, so if it came down to a point of law, I would certainly approve the special permit in this case. But I would agree, this is not a case of the roof being raised or second floor being added. It's just a renovation under the roof of the same house, no dormers.
Okay, Dean?
I have no questions. As far as I'm concerned, what they're doing is if they've gone through the Board of Health, et cetera, they meet the requirements of the Gale case, and thus it is a special permit, regardless of whether or not our building inspector decided whether or not you needed it or not. He made the decision, and a special permit, he said, is required, and based upon his determination that a special permit is necessary, I have no objections to it because I think it meets the Gale case 100%, so.
Al?
I'm in agreement with the council on this. It's an enclosed structure, there's no additions to the roof, doesn't extend beyond the current parameters of the house. And when was that house built?
1970.
1970? All right, I agree with my cohorts here.
Mike?
This is good. This is interesting. So many of our cases aren't this interesting. Not to put the other cases down, but just the legalese. I would be concerned that the board may be doing the wrong thing by granting a special permit, and that they should be allowed to by right. My inclination would be to ask council to continue this to next month and bring us a legal memorandum stating his position as to why he believes it's as of right as opposed to special permit. I don't think, just because we reached a correct outcome, I don't think we could take either avenue. The board's directed to do one or the other, so I don't think just saying, well, they can do it, we'll give them a special permit. I don't think that's what the board's supposed to do. That would be my inclination.
Right. Could I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Well, first of all, Ms. Bird is raring to go, all right? So I don't know if another month, if she were sitting here, she'd say, I don't think so. Can't you give your legal memorandum now? And I was trying to do that verbally.
Oh, you did an excellent job. I just
Yeah.
do it.
But I think the key is in Section 3 of the State Act. And of course, the State Act takes predominance, just like federal law takes precedence over contrary Massachusetts law in obvious areas that it is directed to. When Section 3 says that a zoning ordinance or bylaw shall not regulate or restrict the interior area of a single-family residence, I think hits it right on the mark. I think that, and because most of zoning has to do with the effect on the neighborhood, this is, of course, not a use issue. We're not putting a restaurant in a residential zone or any of that. And as I mentioned in my presentation, the neighbors are not affected in any way by this person finishing off a room of their house. And so I think that from a zoning perspective, state law controls. The legislature has said other parts of the town government will look at this, but not from a zoning point. Zoning doesn't address purely interior changes. So that would be my legal memorandum, actually. So.
I mean, zoning can affect interior matters as the zoning board connects or interplays with other boards, Board of Health, et cetera.
Well, it interconnects.
It interconnects.
But, I mean, if this were, let's just say, not a habitable dwelling, then the Board of Health would review it and say, we have nothing on this, we have nothing to add, it's not a habitable dwelling, there's no bathroom, there's no, whatever, kitchen, no food being prepared. I mean, just say it was a shed,
Sure, yeah.
So I think that the building commissioner needs to do his initial review. That is certainly a must. But I think that this would set an awful precedent if you were to abide by the building commissioner's decision, because literally every permit where anybody is changing their kitchen, redoing a room, maybe taking an interior wall down and making one room into 2 rooms, or vice versa, if every one of those had to come before the Board of Appeals, that would be like ridiculous.
Well, no, I don't agree with that, because it's gotta be an increase to habitable area. If you're simply taking down the wall and you've got habitable on either side, you're not probably increasing the habitable area beyond maybe a couple of inches. So those cases don't come here, but when you've got an
Yeah.
attic and you're now making a bedroom, I think that is an increase of the habitable area beyond a de minimis increase of just removing the wall.
Yeah, and I would agree, under your bylaw, that if this were a garage that was going to be converted into a habitable space, arguably that should, because it's expanding the footprint of what has been the dwelling, and habitable space is essentially the dwelling portion. It excludes bathrooms, excludes closets, halls, and that sort of thing. But in this case, it's not. The habitable space, totally within the 4 walls and the roof of the building. And I think that's when Section 3 kicks in. And I
Okay.
think, as I said, common sense. I really think common sense here applies. Why would this be coming before a zoning board in the first place? What does zoning have to do with what someone does within their own home? I don't think zoning was ever intended to address, what happens inside one's own home.
Megan, are you done, Mike?
Not saying I've reached a conclusion, and I don't want you to leave here either with, our blessing, whether it's a special permit or overruling the building inspector. I want you to leave here with the right
Right.
permission, and I think it's, I'm just trying to, I understand state law trumps the town law, and I'm just trying to, in my head, put the two together.
Well, if we could, Mr. Chairman, let's use the example of the dormer. That is allowed as a matter of right.
Yes.
But that you're breaking through the roof, all right? Why would a dormer be allowed as a matter of right, and doing the same work within the same room not be allowed as a matter of right? It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Presumably, with the dormer, you're not increasing the habitable area.
But I
Just
see,
Well, but
making
it's exactly
window
what you're doing.
space, essentially.
Most dormers the purpose of a dormer is because you have a sloping roof and you can't get the headroom out. So you put a dormer in, whether it's
It depends what you mean by a dormer, just a dormer window versus a
Right,
dormer.
exactly.
That's different.
Right.
I'm having a problem here with the fact that on the top of page 2, there are 2 criteria: increasing the non-conforming nature of the structure, which the proposed construction would not, and increasing the habitable floor area. Yes, it's increasing the habitable floor area, but it's not increasing the non-conforming nature of the structure. The footprint of the house and all the setbacks are going to remain exactly the same. So I don't see why a special permit would be required.
But I think that sentence actually says that if you increase the habitable floor area, you are, in fact, increasing the non-conforming nature.
No, that's not what it says. An addition extension that increases would include, oh, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The way they've defined it, I mean,
But it's not
I think in paragraph 2 where it says that the Board of Appeals determines that the alteration or extension will increase the non-conforming nature of the structure, which I don't think is happening.
Correct.
Then he would be eligible for a special permit, but I don't even think he's, I don't see how he's extending the non-conforming nature.
Well, would you
Giving the
ponder that?
examples
Megan, do you have
Yeah.
anything?
They're giving the examples of extending the, increasing the non-conforming nature is the A, B, and C options on the next page. I think that's what they're saying is, that would require a special permit. I mean, I agree that the state law in this case would trump it, would trump the special permit.
What are the ramifications of our approving the special permit if in fact a legal case can be made that it's not necessary to have a special permit?
I don't think there's gonna be any. Probably either way. I doubt anybody is gonna challenge this legally. I think Attorney Farber makes a valid point. Nobody's gonna even know because it's interior. This is something we've faced many times. The zoning bylaw is not clear, it's contradictory in many parts, and this is probably one of those parts, so it's up to really us to interpret it. And I don't think, from a legal standpoint, there's any jeopardy one way or the other. I guess I would feel more secure in seeing them get a special permit because the board has then, given them a solid legal basis to proceed if anybody did want to come forward. But if they want to go without it, it's up to this board to decide that. Let me move on. Does anyone in the public wish to address this case? No. Would you like to add anything further?
No, I'll come back to Ms. Muller's point. Again, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. This could be a better written bylaw. It's a little too kind of interwoven. But focusing on an addition/extension that increases the non-conforming nature would include, and then there's 3 examples, but you start with the premise of an addition or extension, and if there's no addition or extension, you don't even get to A, B, and C. They just don't apply.
Well, I guess it depends on how you
How you read it.
define addition or extension.
And that's where I say I never go wrong with just applying basic common sense. If you're not going outside the walls of the roof.
Well, okay, we've heard this. The board's going to decide. I think at this point, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Second it.
In favor? All right, we'll close the public hearing now. Board, you can discuss this.
I have a question.
I think the applicant should be granted relief, just a question of which one.
I think a special permit is necessary here, but what really bothers me is that our building commissioner stated that table regulation, the proposed construction does not conform to the required property line setbacks. Well, we already know that. It's non-conforming. That kind of a comment doesn't bring it to our attention. And I think that's a wrong quote. I think it should have been, it has to do with increasing the habitable space, which I believe does require us to look at that under the condition of a special permit. And since it meets the Gale case all the way around, and it is non-conforming and not increasing the non-conformity, then I think we should give it a special permit, but not because it does not conform to the required property line setbacks.
Agreed, I agree with that. Any further discussion by the board?
When the home was built, it was built in 1970. Home was built in 1970?
Yes.
At the time, the setbacks differed, so the building inspector would cite the newest setbacks,
He
but it's non-conforming, so,
was conforming when built,
right,
Right.
but not.
All right, well, I will entertain a motion in this case.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding case 2018-18, Jane C. Bird is hereby granted a special permit to finish the second floor level, adding habitable space into a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling. The application was made pursuant to the Code of Town of Harwich, Section 325, Table 2, area regulations set forth in MGL 40A, Section 6, property located at Carriage Lane, map 53, partial G4 in the RR zoning district. The application included all of that information sent to us by the original application, which is a plan of the land of Harwich in October 1966. 2 photographs. And site plan dated 6/28/2018, along with a drawing to scale of the second floor plan by Donald Meyer, and that is dated, I wish I could read it, but
It's July something.
July something, July 8th, 2018, maybe? Let's call it that, 2018.
31.
And the board hereby grants this special permit. They're finding that there is no new nonconformity, and there will be no resulting substantial detriment to the neighborhood. And because the property is located in an area and what's being done is not going to cause a substantial problem to property or parking, et cetera, we don't need to put any further restrictions on it.
Do we have a second to Mr. Hedersted's motion?
second.
Mr. Donahue, second. Any further discussion by the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Special permit granted.
Well, thank you very
Okay,
much.
thanks for your time, we appreciate it.
I did like your argument. I don't agree with it, but I thought it was a very good argument.
Very kind.
This one, I don't think we need to stamp the photographs, do we? Just 2 plans, I think will be okay.
No, this was,
Get rid of it.
Plans, thanks.
I know it is.
He'll send it to us. Sends it to us.
Discard piles?
I wasn't thinking of that, but you're
Those
absolutely
can be
right.
2 different things, you know.
Okay,
It can be
case.
just the glass, or it can be the whole damn thing.
Case 2018-19, Christopher J. Barton and Lisa N. Barton for their agent, Brendan Lowney of Cape Associates, have applied for a special permit to rebuild an existing detached garage with a new foundation, adding a second floor with a bathroom and a bedroom and a pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-54 and Table 2 Area Regulations, as set forth in MGL Chapter 40A, Section 6. The property is located at 11 River Pine Circle, map 11, parcel P3-15 in the RL zoning district. If you could approach the table, please.
good evening.
If you could introduce yourself, please.
Brendan Lowney from Cape Associates, and this is Rich Bryant with Cape Associates.
Okay, before we proceed, though, I want to defer to Ms. Muller to a point she was going to make on the plans submitted and the grid.
I have a question about the fact that the chart of required, existing, and proposed setbacks is incomplete, and I could not find a complete one anywhere in here.
Okay.
Did anyone else?
No, I didn't get it.
Mine were also incomplete. I have my notes here, what would be missing on the chart.
If you have a look at this application,
Okay. I have those with me tonight. Sorry if I didn't make the right copy and submit it with the application.
Right, because it wasn't shown on your plan either. Sometimes the engineer will put a table which will have the info. We don't like it, but
Correct.
we can deal with that.
Mhm.
But this plan doesn't have that.
Okay,
So I think to go forward, before you get going, we need that info
okay.
before the board.
Is that something I can give you tonight, or
If you have it,
I can make copies of it? Can
Yeah.
you do that?
yeah, I think the board has to have that in front of it to
Sure. These are my notes, I don't know if that's the original.
parse through this.
I have questions about that. I have questions about the setbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we need that.
Conspicuous absence of the numbers makes one wonder. But I don't know. I don't know.
I think, yeah, see, this is a septic plan which we have,
Yeah, there's a septic.
sometimes refuse to
and-
accept.
And there is a site plan as well.
There is a site plan.
And there's one that has a blown-up portion of where the proposed garage is going to be. It's
Okay.
tough to read the setbacks on the side, which is 21.8, which just makes it.
Okay, this is what you're calling a site study, you're calling the site plan.
That's the site plan.
Okay.
beautiful piece of property.
I'm sorry?
It's a beautiful piece of property.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful
Very nice.
house, too. Ooh.
Thank you, Sheila.
Oh, great, thanks, Sean.
That's okay, that's all right, as long as they get a decent copy of it.
Okay, just on the frontage, the existing is at 90?
Is at 90, correct?
Okay. Okay, you may proceed,
Right,
please.
thank you. So as stated, we're looking to remove an existing garage, rebuild in the existing footprint, and it's gonna add a second floor with a bathroom and bedroom. It's a pre-existing condition, non-conforming lot. When I got in front of the building commissioner, and this application has already gone to the Board of Health, they took a look, the septic, it satisfies the need there for an additional bedroom, what they're looking to put in, and then through conservation with notice of intent. So we've already did those two steps. When I got in front of Ray, the building commissioner, we talked about the frontage being an issue, and then he also picked out, which I agreed with them, a non-conforming use at 325-54B. The fact that, except for single and two-family dwellings, any lawful pre-existing structure, whether conforming or not, would be in need of a special permit if it were to be changed or altered.
So we found that as well, so it's two parts that were non-conforming in a way, but we think we could satisfy all of B1, A, B, and C. So tonight, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for approval on the special permit to move forward with the project.
Okay, we're gonna have voting on this case. Ms. Muller, Mr. Hederstat, Mr. Donahue, Mr. Capoli, and Ms. Mayhew. I will not vote, but I will start off questioning. So this is going to be a bedroom?
It's gonna be a bedroom, correct?
Okay. So it will be used for seasonal living?
That's correct.
Okay. That's important because if it were not, then you would be an accessory building residential, your garage
Understood, yeah.
extends. And as it is, if you're gonna use it for seasonal use for living, it's gonna be a pre-existing, I think non-conforming, I wanna get to that in a minute, but if it is a pre-existing non-conforming structure, other than a single or two-family residential structure, which it will be, it's a garage, then you're going to need a variance if you don't conform to the current setbacks in coverage. Now, why does this not conform? You're at 21.8. Why are you non-conforming? Because I guess you don't have 150 feet of frontage, is that it? Because you're on the circle?
That's correct. And the original use for, when we sat down with the Bartons, they were looking for just the extra space, a great room, but once we started developing the project and they wanted to add a bathroom, that's when we put the brakes on and deemed it would be considered a bedroom. So that's where we left it as, and it makes sense that it would be a bedroom, bathroom, there's gonna be a door, separation between the garage space and upper floor.
Okay, just for the board that's voting, my reading of the statute here is that they're gonna require a variance.
I had a question with
But
regard.
let's start with Ms. Muller, and then
fine.
we'll go around. I'm sorry, I wanted you folks to start thinking about that. Why don't you talk to variance? Why would you qualify for a variance? You've got to show a hardship. Due to soil condition, shape, topography.
Mr. Chairman, could you reiterate your stance as to why you believe this requires a variance versus just a special
Right,
permit?
when I look at 32554, A7, it says alteration or extension of other structures. Other structure being anything other than a single or two-family residential structure. This is not a single-family or two-family residential structure, it's a garage. So that section says unless it conforms to current sitebacks and coverage for the zoning district, you will have to get a variance when you put it all together. If in fact it was just a great room and you weren't using it for seasonal living, it would then be deemed, in my opinion, an accessory building residential. And that would get you the residential designation under the bylaw, where then you'd only need a special permit.
Correct. So when I was speaking to Ray, we did review all of this, and we just kept on coming back to the non-conforming use. So except for single and two-family dwellings provided, you may, for a non-conforming use, go to special permit, and it gave the requirements there. So that's where we kept on going back to. We deemed there's a pre-existing condition, footprint's not gonna change.
But see, I don't think that the use is non-conforming because it's a residential use in a residential district. I don't think it's a use issue, I think it's a structure issue.
Does not a detached garage that goes along with a one and two family building permit application therefore be considered part of that residential use?
Well, I think the issue is that it's detached. If it were attached, you could argue, and this board has faced that, we've taken the position that that is part of the single-family residential structure. But you've got a garage that's separated by, I don't know how many feet here, 20 or 50 feet from the residence. It's really kind of an accessory building under the code. But let me turn it over to the board and see what they have to say. Ms. Muller,
I'm not ready with a question at this time.
Mr. Hedersted.
Oh, boy. This is, is this seasonal? Are you gonna use this garage as a permanent, if you will, living area within your lot 15? You're gonna be permanently located in there?
No, it is, as stated before, it would be a seasonal. Right now, the house is only used seasonally.
Just seasonal?
I don't think we're in a
Is-
position to,
yeah.
excuse me, I don't think we're in a
That's
position
true,
to
that's
speak
true,
to the use, the intended use that the owners of the property intend to use this for.
The intended use is just seasonal, as far as you're concerned.
This gentleman,
Again, I would like to withdraw any comment that may have been misconstrued. I don't want to speak on behalf of the owner without them being here as to how often they utilize their structure. So whether they're there 11 months out of the year or 6 months out of the year, we're here before you just to seek relief on a nonconformity, which is the frontage of the lot.
It makes a significant difference, because I don't think if you were gonna go other than temporary, you're gonna require a variance, and you don't have any hardship. I mean, this is for your own addition, other than the living space that's already in your existing dwelling. This is in addition to that, for overflow, I assume, et cetera, and during the summer months, because you've got a beautiful spot here. And so if it's more than that, then I think you're gonna have a variance. If it's just that, I think it meets the requirements. Dave says, by the bylaw, you get a special permit, but
I'd like to make a comment, if I could.
Not yet. We're gonna take care of the board. I will give you an opportunity.
so I think it's very important, because you're adding a bathroom, which means that, essentially, you got a shower, a bathtub, the whole works. I mean, this is a resident, if you will.
no kitchen.
I'd like to make the
No
point.
kitchen,
I'd
no
like to make the
kitchen.
point that there's not a
No
full
kitchen,
complement
but,
of services there for it to be considered.
But, friends can stay there, family can stay there, and troop over to the house if they need to for dinner, but, other than that, I'll let it go at that.
To satisfy your, to give you an answer, and the lady that just raised her hand is the mother of Lisa Barton, who owns the property. If you wanted her to come up and join us for a brief second to talk to that point, it may satisfy. That would be your discretion.
Let me go through the board,
Sure.
and then I'll invite the public to comment.
Thank you.
Ms. Muller, back to you.
I see this as a residential accessory building. We're changing a garage into a residential accessory building. Does that
Well, look at the definition, though. Accessory building residential.
Detached structure located on the same lot with the principal residential structure to which it is accessory. Such structures include but are not limited to tool shed, boathouse, playhouse, shelter for domestic pets, private swimming pool, and one private garage for not more than 3 automobiles. A residential accessory building may contain bedrooms but not a kitchen.
Does you might have a prior version. This one, that's 1/1/2017, says "and not used for seasonal or year-round living."
I am looking at a 2014 version.
You've got the old version, unfortunately. Look at the new one. I would agree with that, but they've added this new provision by amendment.
Well, okay, so this says not used for seasonal or year-round living. So that means it's incidental living. I mean, what does that mean, not seasonal and not year-round? When can you use it?
Well, I think if you're gonna use it as a guest house, in effect, you're not considered an accessory building residential. You're an accessory building.
Well, what is an accessory building residential that is used neither for seasonal use nor for year-round living?
Tool shed, boathouse, playhouse, shelter for domestic pets, swimming pool, garage.
Okay, so we're back to accessory building?
Right. And since it's an accessory building, not a residential, when you go back to 32554, unfortunately, they drop into A7, alteration or extension of other structure other than a single or two-family residential structure. And it's
So your point
unfortunate.
is this requires a variance?
Yeah. And we have faced this a number of times
I-
over the years, and it's unfortunate, but that is the current bylaw.
So is the board, if the board's in agreement that a variance is what's required rather than a special permit, how do we proceed this evening?
Well, we're gonna keep going to the other board members, and then we'll hear from the public, and then we'll talk about that. Mr. Donahue?
I had a question with regard to the rear setback. It says 52 feet. That goes down to the water.
I took that line directly from, if you're looking at the garage, the left-hand corner back, going straight back, the first point I hit, but it probably goes back 200 feet. I'm taking the shortest distance so you can see it. If not, it probably projects out. If you go over another 30 feet, that calculation I don't have, but it'd be a lot further out.
I'm sorry, what's the 52 feet to the coastal?
That's correct, from the back left-hand
Okay.
corner
Okay.
to the side,
Coastal
it's
bank,
21.8.
No water issues with that property, with an addition being on that building. That doesn't, I guess my question has to do with the floodplain if it happens to.
We've already been to conservation
Yeah,
Okay.
with the
Thank you.
intent, yes, that's already been
It would-
satisfied.
Yeah,
It does that.
had to go there.
I'm
Mr.
done.
Mr. Capoli?
I had a sort of a similar thought, couching it as one sort of structure, but it's really used as another. I wonder if the other departments would have had a different look at it. Does that make sense?
Well, conservation, if they're doing a bedroom, they'll have to go to Board of Health.
Health, yeah.
Already been to Board of Health and Conservation.
Yeah, it's already gone through health and conservation. I can provide you with the letter from the health department saying they approved it. It's a 6-bedroom septic. They currently have 5 bedrooms in the house. This would be the additional one.
Is it currently a slab or a full basement?
It's currently on slab, granite, and wood. It's a mixture.
And what are you replacing it with?
Slab on grade.
Slab on grade.
Slab on grade.
With foundation footings, 12 feet down.
Ms. Mayhew?
guess I'm still looking through things. I mean, I certainly don't think how they intend to use it or how many days a year they intend to use it has anything to do with it actually being seasonal, right? I mean, it's more about like an enclosed gazebo versus a building that is tight to the weather, right? Am I right about that? I felt like we were getting off on a tangent on the seasonal use. That doesn't really matter.
Well, it does, because that's the definition of an accessory building residential.
But in this case, I mean, it's obviously, you could go in and use it in the winter, right? I mean, it's not like it's seasonal to the extent that it's unusable year-round.
I don't follow.
I guess I don't either. I'm still, I don't know, I don't
Basically, if there's any seasonal use,
see.
it's going to fall out of the definition of accessory building residential. And it's the residential that would let them do a special permit.
Right,
When
right.
it's not residential, it's under the code, it's a variance.
Okay, I'm unfamiliar with the seasonal part. Do we have that here, or is that in the other,
It's just in the definition of accessory building
it's in our other
residential.
book? Okay,
It's the only place that I'm aware of it.
yeah, okay, I don't,
All right, I'm gonna open it up to the public. If you could come to the podium, Liz, please, and identify yourself for us and your address.
My name is Carol Spiegelhalter. I live in West Dennis, and I am charged with the responsibility of maintaining this property. My daughter and son-in-law own the property. They bought it in 2011, and if you had seen it in 2011 and you look at it right now, it is day and night. It is incredibly beautiful, where it was a rambling shack, overgrown. There are 2 acres of land with the property, and it is now a very beautiful piece of property. It is seasonal, and I'm not sure I'm following your arguments on that, in terms of, they live in Columbus, Ohio. They have a very large home in German Village in Ohio. Their jobs are for American Electric Power. They are there for the duration, they're 50 years old. They will be at American Electric Power for many, many years to come. Because it was a 5-bedroom home that is now a 4-bedroom home, their idea was to take that garage area and have the 5th bedroom that the property was zoned for. It doesn't seem to be much of an issue in terms of they don't rent the property. It is, when I say seasonal, they come out between May and October. They might come out Christmas. They might come out Thanksgiving, a few days. They don't have that much vacation time. It is definitely a seasonal type property. And it has been since 2011. And I maintain it. I'm a real estate broker, and that's my new job. And that's all I can say. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? All right, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I think the anomaly here is if you weren't gonna build out the garage, if you were just gonna put up a new structure, you could get away with a special permit. Because it would simply be an increase of an existing nonconformity.
with unfinished space above, is that what you're saying?
If they weren't gonna rehab the existing structure, if they were just gonna, you know, take a patch of bare ground and build the structure, I think then they would only need a special permit, because they would simply be increasing the nonconformity, not creating a new one. But because of the way the code is, it's sort of like the last case.
Yes.
The code is not well-written, okay? It's been, over the years,
Tinkered with.
amended here and there, and it's never really been gone through for conformity. So it doesn't always make good sense. But the way it's currently structured, if you parse through it, they need a variance to convert the garage. Whereas if they were just building a new garage with the room above, they would only require a special permit. And that's just a function of the code.
I think as far as code goes, 325, 54, 7B, I think that gives us the, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think that gives us the authority to give them the special permit, the variance.
Well, the problem is, Mr. Hedersted observed, I don't believe they can meet the requirement of a variance. For variance, they would have to show, because of the soil conditions, shape, topography, the land or structures, there's a substantial
Well, I'm sorry,
hardship.
I didn't mean to say that they would meet. I'm saying that I think that's where they've landed, is into that subsection.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I think that's where they're left, is in that subsection.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I don't see the way of getting out of that.
Exactly
So-
where I'm coming from.
I'm sorry, I guess I just said
Yeah,
the same
no, I'm
thing in
sorry,
my
I
own
thought,
sort of
yeah, no,
turned around.
that's where I started out. I think they're stuck with A7B. What I would suggest to you folks is maybe you ask for a continuance
Yeah.
and sort of regroup
I think we'll do just that.
and not call for a vote tonight, but it's your decision.
Yeah, no, I think that's the prudent thing to do. I think at this time, we'd ask for a continuance and regroup based on what we've just heard and speak with the client.
Let me ask our secretary, how many,
9 cases next
No.
month?
how many cases?
9.
9, so we could not do it next month. You would have to continue to October. And I think we need to have them sign the agreement, extending the time.
I got that one.
And I won't be here in October, but the 5 people that are voting presumably will, so my loss will be my absence will be no loss.
That's not true.
So is that your desire? Would you like to, are you gonna ask for a
Yeah,
continuance?
we're formally asking for a continuance.
Okay, I'd like a motion to continue this case until 7 o'clock on, what's the date of our October meeting?
Got everything all over the place. Here we go. October the 31st, Halloween.
Okay, October, we'll continue the case until 7 PM, October 31st. If I could have a motion to that effect?
So move.
Second.
I heard from Mr. Capoli first, and
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, granted. We'll continue the case, but we need to have you sign an extension.
Sure.
It's extremely confusing.
Extremely confusing.
Yeah,
and
nothing easy about this one.
I'm glad to have some extra time.
It's
There's
ridiculous.
nothing wrong with the building, I don't, it's just
Why shouldn't
legally
there be
speaking.
a bedroom?
You know, I can understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to
2014
prevent
version
from
of the,
apartments. I can understand that.
Bylaw.
Right.
But otherwise, I don't know what the problem is.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and
These were 2 bizarre cases.
we've had this come up a number of times. This is certainly not the first time.
You know, I can understand the concern. You know, you don't want an apartment there, because, you know, so that's the whole thing. So what are we doing? You're saying you can't do what
You
they
can't
just
have a
did?
special permit and you can't get a variance because you don't have a hardship?
Right.
That's
Did you sign this
Crazy.
on the bottom?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
you.
I don't. Sometimes I wonder.
Just stamp it.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Thought process without getting confused.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but there are many sections of this bylaw that contradict other sections.
Yeah.
Well, could I bring up some things just based on, we have cases coming up where it's a basement garage, no extension out, same you know, it's all interior, but they're changing from a garage to a finished basement, and they're coming next month.
Increase in habitable space.
Well, exactly. We had a case two sessions ago. It was the Shiffens. I can't remember the property address, but they had teenage girls, and they had the same sort of space where they're putting in 2 dormers, just like 2 dormers required a special permit. We've been continuously and historically, not that we have to follow precedent, but continuously and historically going on that premise that the increase in habitable space.
Right, which I mentioned.
Within the
In
same,
the setback.
without an addition or extension.
Exactly,
Without anything going up.
Right.
It's an increase in habitable, which is what it says in the code.
right.
So it was an interesting argument, but it's not the way we've been.
Right, I mean, I understood his argument, but we've never agreed with that as a board. Historically, our position has always been an increase in habitable floor area.
That would be a complete
under that
left turn
section.
from where we've been, and we'd
Right.
have to change all of the
Right.
going forward.
Requires a
So,
special
so you
permit.
think we were or were not consistent to do a special permit, Shayla?
We
We
were
have been
consistent.
doing special permits
Okay.
consistently.
Yeah, we were consistent. And I personally think that's the way to go, because I think that's a better legal basis to proceed on.
The only way you can control it.
It's the only way you can control it, and I think we, as a board, owe it to our building commissioner to only overturn his decisions where we feel there's good, valid legal justification. Because he's out there dealing with the public on this stuff, and he's making a decision. And if, unless his decision is clearly wrong under the law, I think we should support the building commissioner.
Okay,
On the
Yeah,
other
but the
side-
building commissioners, what he reported that time is not right.
Well, do you want to address that?
Well,
It is within the setback.
That's
Wait a
why I
minute.
asked the question when the home was built.
But can I ask, are we still on, or are we?
Yeah.
Well, when it was built, it might have met the requirements, but it does not now.
Right, exactly.
And that's what makes it now, what makes it
But that's why
non-conforming.
he denied it based
Current
upon
setbacks.
on the current setbacks.
To send it to us. I think
Yeah.
Al's point is,
That's why it
he's
got to
just
us.
saying this is the issue why it's not conforming, and now we, as the board, need to sort out the details of the bylaw. That just gets it to us.
Yeah, a lot of them come into us that way.
In other words, he's saying it's not conforming, it requires a special permit, but he doesn't go into, working through
That's
the
why
code
it's not conforming,
sections.
because it's 1970 building.
His position is pretty much if they're doing something on a non-conforming lot, it's gotta have a special permit, and he sends it to us. And then,
But if it's a conforming lot,
oh,
You
we
don't.
don't see those normally, unless there's something
I
unusual.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I understand.
So first I agreed, but then when Al
Yeah.
brought up the point, I thought about it and said, yeah, that's why Ray is taking that position, to get it into our lap, and then we make the determination under the code. But I do think, it was a good discussion, I appreciate it, but I feel you did the right thing as a board by requiring and granting a special permit. To me, it was very clear, no detriment to the neighborhood.
Right.
And that's gonna be the case in probably 99% of these interior things. But I think the board should always try to base its decision on the code, on legality. And that's why these people, I'd love to let them do that, but there's no basis under the code to grant them a special permit.
so if they can't get a special permit and they can't get a variance.
They can't do it.
They can't
But
do
they
it.
could go
But
before
they
the
can
planning
build,
board
but they
and
can
get-
build,
No, they can build an
they
accessory
can build a
building.
garage.
Yes,
With empty space up there.
yes.
They-
And then they can
Yes.
come around
They can
and
do-
say they
Well, they
want
don't
it.
even have to do that. They would come and get the special permit to build a garage with the finished space.
Right.
Yeah, you just go before the planning board
No,
for an
pla-
accessory
in-
building, it's that
In this
easy.
town, the planning board doesn't take it unless it's a conforming lot.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
the planning board cannot deal with non-conforming lots. They all
So
come
wait,
here.
Dave, say what you said. That's what they just said. They said they want to build a garage with a bedroom.
Well, they want to convert a garage. That's
No,
the
they want
problem.
to take down.
No, they're taking it down and they're rebuilding it on the same footprint.
I didn't say that.
They didn't say that.
But
That's
I
what
think
the
it says so.
It
application
says it in the
said.
application,
Yeah,
they
that's
just
what it-
didn't argue it.
it says it on the first page of the,
I asked about
Appeal.
what type of foundation was there. what was the
Rebuild an
reason.
Right, my
existing
assumption was
detached
Rebuild.
It's
garage
going to begin to support the second
with a
floor.
new
Yeah.
foundation, adding a second floor.
on existing footprint.
That's the way I read it. existing
Right,
footprint.
so it's
taking
and a
it
new
down, and
the
foundation,
then-
existing
another two.
footprint, is it a new garage is all you have to decide.
But it's a new
Is it
use.
building, if
I
it's on
still
an
think
existing,
they're caught under the definition
I think.
of accessory building. I still think they're in that. I think they would have to come in with new construction.
But so,
So they'd have to take the whole thing down and rebuild it.
I think so.
6 inches to the side.
But you know what? I think,
But this language
What they need
suggests
to
that they're
do-
doing that.
my opinion is they need to go get legal counsel on this. We shouldn't be telling them, you know, what they need to do. We
Right,
just tell them they
okay,
don't
okay.
meet the current
If I
requirement.
remember, did anybody else visit this property?
Yes.
Yes.
I did this afternoon.
Yeah, it's lovely.
My understanding is that it's gonna be a different structure. The door's gonna be in a different place.
Well, there's gonna be a dorm is on the
It's gonna be a completely different looking
It's gonna
structure.
be completely, it's gonna be
But there's
completely,
still cars shown in the
This
diagram.
is-
in the
Yeah.
yes, but
garages.
this is not where the garage doors are now, if I remember correctly.
I'm trying to think.
they're saying rebuild, I guess we need to know what they mean by that.
Yeah, they do say rebuild.
It's
So-
all over the place, says rebuild.
I interpreted that as an alteration.
I
Oh, no.
interpreted that as a
Rebuilding.
tear down.
I interpreted it as a tear
And
down
that's
also,
why I was
especially after
disagreeing.
seeing it and noting, oh, those doors are in different places.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a little better, because I was not sure why we couldn't do it on the same footprint, especially if they were, but I think you're right, I think they need legal advice.
I think they need to come back to us with something. They weren't prepared to address that issue.
Right, okay, yep.
Okay, do we have anything else?
Yes, we have much more to go. I need a motion for approving the minutes. I have some changes that were suggested by Mr. Ryer, which I will take care of. Did anybody else see anything they'd like to change in it? Tim?
The principal change, it was on the, what's the property?
There were a couple of grammatical
No, the one
changes,
that the
and with the case that we now have the appeal on,
Right.
34 Braddock, Mr. Ryer said that I wrote on all the remaining board members had heard all of the prior testimony and were therefore eligible to vote on this case with the approval of the applicant. Mr. Ryer said he did not need the approval of the applicant, so we're taking that out.
Yeah, I did not ask for the applicant's approval. Attorney Reed said he approved, but I didn't ask for that. My position is, well, no, wait.
Yeah.
My position is if there's a board member present and then it gets continued and you weren't on the voting panel, but you heard all the testimony, you're entitled to
You're
vote
eligible.
at the next, and I don't need the applicant's approval.
Right.
Or the objector's approval. You know, we'll go forward on that basis, and if they don't like it, they can sue us on
Yeah, I
that,
did one of those.
on that score too.
Right,
I
yeah.
think that's a valid legal position. I think as long as we are present to hear the testimony, we can vote on it in the absence of another member.
Right.
So that's been my
But the point was
position.
that they didn't need to approve that.
What I do ask for their approval on is, we had the 4 board members, do they wanna go forward with 4? Or do they wanna come back
Which I
next
referred
month
to in
with
the early
5?
part of the minute, so
And that I
that's-
do ask for their, approval or not.
You
They
have
can-
to, yeah.
I
Yeah.
may stand corrected, though, on the one I did was on YouTube, I was not here for it.
You
But I
can,
went to YouTube.
Yes.
And I
What did you
think,
think of the,
I could stand corrected,
of
that
the-
the applicant
the guy who submitted his,
attorney was to accept my
Sued us
viewing of
now.
the YouTube
what did
proceedings.
you get a chance to read it?
Possibly.
That was
What do you
another
think?
time,
all
correct?
That was
I
another
confused the
time.
pioneer.
And I guess.
It's none of which he brought up here.
I have sort of
Nothing.
Oh, we did
rethought
bring
that
that up. We told him
YouTube
to
is the
keep
same
the
as
change.
being present, and I'm not
Talking
gonna
about
do
what?
that again. And we're
We
just
did
gonna
bring
take
it
the
up
position.
When he was here, and we told him it didn't apply. that
If they wanna
wasn't
challenge, they can
protected.
challenge, as long as you've heard all the testimony that
The
was
first part
presented.
of the
I don't
discussion he
think
was
the court
talking
is gonna
about
say you're not qualified to vote.
when he
You
had,
heard the
we were here,
testimony.
was
I think you're qualified to vote.
They're gonna stare into a
Okay, so I
tower.
need a motion for that approval.
the, wait a minute, no, we.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second? On the minutes?
Fine,
All in
Anybody
favor?
second? 7:30.
All approved.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes approved.
Okay, now just a couple of housekeeping before we get to executive. You saw the new code books that came in, you're all gonna take those. I have your
Hey, Sheila,
packets for
I
September.
have this one from another day, and then this one, they both say, printed January, printed June. Are they different?
That's, remember we talked in the beginning, I haven't gone through them to see what the differences are. If you'd like to do that before you throw that one out, You take your tabs out and put them where you want them to
Okay,
be.
I now have 3 of them.
I know that
Okay.
that is the most recent copy that's now in the hardback. I
And-
have
and
packets,
Who amends this and when?
I do.
I think it's voted.
The town council goes through and looks at them and approves with the board of
David.
selectmen and the,
What did you think of the suit?
if you like, I'll look into it.
I think some of
I
that's
would
done.
like to know, I would like to know who approves the zoning code and when.
The
I
planning
remember.
board approves all, proposes all amendments. Sometimes they will ask us for input. More often than not, they do not. And that's one of the reasons the code is like it is, because the amendments are done with a narrow focus instead
Instead
of
of
looking at
where
the
they-
whole code, and that's where we end up
So
with
is
these
that how we get the
conflicts.
contradiction between accessory building and accessory building
Yeah.
residential?
Exactly. And
Right.
sometimes we have been asked for input and we give it.
What is
But,
this?
under the town charter, the planning board has sole jurisdiction
I
to
won't be here
propose amendments to
next
the
week.
zoning code.
Did you have a good
Next
vacation, by
month.
the way?
Thank you.
I'm passing out your packets for September.
Thank you.
Because we have 9 cases, I thought if you can spend some time in advance, looking these over, some of them are more complex than others, but it's going to take time.
Those are ready, they're all done, that's it? There will be nothing new?
Well, unless somebody comes to me and asks me to stamp something in,
Okay.
this
What-
is what's gone down to the clerk.
And when do we close? When's our window close?
For accepting these?
Yeah, for
Last Thursday.
Oh, okay, so there won't be any more then.
Right, I mean, but sometimes people will come with other information. And I wanted to just hold off on putting the agenda in the, on the town website until we saw if anything else was gonna roll over into next month. So that's that piece. You saw that I left at your spaces information about the Cape Housing Institute. You all had packets on your
Yes,
area.
thank you.
It's a 6-week series, 1 section per
Yes.
week, there are 4 different locations, look it over, you can apply, you do it yourself.
Is there any money in the budget to cover that, or do we pay for that ourselves?
Wait a minute, excuse me, guys, wait a minute.
Sorry, is there any money in the budget to cover training, or do we pay for that ourselves?
You shouldn't have to pay for it. You're a volunteer.
You pay for yourself unless.
No, I don't see why we can't,
You can
Have
ask
the
for
town
reimbursement,
pay?
yep.
Yeah, you're a volunteer.
yeah, the township pay for that.
Okay,
So, yeah,
you ever get your
work with
certificate?
Shayla if you wanna go.
I shall.
She'll get it reimbursed.
Yeah, you shouldn't be.
Al and I never
We
got,
never got a certificate.
we never got a
Okay, I have one last
certificate
thing
from them.
before we go into
All right.
executive. Do you all understand Chapter 91, Water Quality Certification Public Notice? I got this today. This is a Chapter 91 and 401 Water Quality Certification Public Notification about dredging that's going to happen at Oyster Creek Preservation. I tell you only because there's a limited period where you can send in written comments. Anyone who wants a copy, I can scan it and email it to you if you would like that, and then you can review it, and it tells you on there where you can send any written comments that you want, but it has to be within 20 days of this, and I looked at it and forgot to write it down. When that was. I will send that to you. Everybody want a copy?
Oh, sure, send it.
I
No,
don't
to
need
Mr.
one.
Ryer, he just thinks it's.
If you could just send me that other thing,
You're gonna scan it?
The other
the
thing was
case, the case, yeah.
Okay.
You know, I don't think we need to go through the whole process of going to executive session just to advise them on, because we're not gonna discuss strategy. We're just
But
gonna,
I've heard that we do.
May as well. No harm in it, is there?
okay, I don't care.
So we can,
It says to discuss strategy relative to pending litigation.
I've
We're
been
not-
told by the town planner very specifically how we move forward with this.
What does she want to do?
Okay. I'm gonna make the motion, we're gonna go into executive session. I move that the Harwich Board adjourn the regular meeting and that the board move into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation.
Second,
Wait a minute. And further, we don't have any other business, right?
We will not.
And further, that the board will not reconvene into regular session following the adjournment of the executive session. So I now will wait until we're clear.
Should we vote first on that?
Yeah, we will
No,
vote on
wait,
that.
we're gonna wait till we go off air.